Welcome back to the Feel Your Freedom podcast, everybody. My name is Emily. As always, I am your host for this week's episode number 32. We are talking about excuses and how, honestly, you're more than those, right? And that's obviously the title of this episode, but this has been inspired by quite a few conversations with members and clients over the years. And I just, it really hit me hard this week, myself included. And I really just wanted to kind of chat on it. So when we're pursuing our health and fitness journey, there is a million things that try and get in the way. There can be information overload, right? There's so much information out there these days. It is insane. Not to mention there can be misinformation, right? Perhaps some information that isn't totally correct, or people have the best of intentions and yet it leads us astray. There can be people that are simply uneducated trying to tell us things that potentially aren't true. It's just crazy. And especially now with fitness becoming more and more popular or mainstream, there can be a million other things. But today and in this episode, we are talking about ourselves. And you might be surprised, but oh yes, we often get in the way of achieving our own goals, either knowingly or unknowingly. For me, I see it in two ways. Either we assign blame to something personal but out of our control, or we have the potential to self-sabotage subconsciously, or sometimes consciously, but usually that ends up in a subconscious. The latter is more complicated, and if you suspect you're self-sabotaging along the way to your fitness journey, I would highly recommend to seek out a certified professional who would be in a position to work with you through this behavior. It's often a sign of something deeper, something more psychological, that often a professional is well equipped to assist you in dealing with the thoughts and emotions and things like that. And you might not even know what that deeper meaning is, but working with a professional can help discover that and find ways to work through that. But the former is what we're talking about today. And you may now be thinking to yourself, Emily, you're saying I'm blaming something personal but out of my control. Like, what exactly does that entail? And a few examples include age, genetics, medications, metabolism, injury or movement deficits, or even dietary restrictions. Maybe things are sounding a little more familiar now, but before we go on with the rest of today's episode, I do want to make a disclaimer that these can be very valid things in their influence on our health and fitness journey, right? And I don't want to downplay that fact. Medications can absolutely play a role. I have a very personal experience with this very recently in my career as well, or my fitness journey, I guess. And I'm working with so many people. Obviously, we have movement deficits or former, current, and past injuries that stand in the way of certain movements or exercises. Now, that being said, these are very, very valid. However, at the same time, we can often overemphasize the influence of these factors, right? So we can say, oh, it is the medication, but have we tried X, Y, Z, right? Can we say with 100% certainty that it's our metabolism, or are there other factors? And that's often why the human body is so cool, I think anyway, because oftentimes it can be a multitude of things. It's incredibly complex and very difficult to narrow down what that one thing is. But when we stand there and we say, hey, it's definitely X, we often fall victim to this thing that's blocking our path, and therefore assuming, sometimes falsely, that there's nothing we can do about it, when that's not necessarily true. And of course, these things can influence, but when we focus on the things that are out of control, we forget the things that are in control, right? So let's use medication, for example, right? Some medications cause us to gain weight or make it very challenging to lose weight, right? So some of the things that we might be forgetting about, I'm going to pose as questions here, and I urge you just to think about them in perhaps terms of medication or metabolism or movement, age, genetics, dietary restrictions, etc., and see if you maybe have fallen kind of under the spell, I guess is the right word, to saying, hey, it is definitely X without considering that it might be Y or Z, or, starting at the top of the alphabet, A, B, or C. So those things that are in control poses questions here. So is it really X or is it something else? Are we eating in a calorie deficit if we're trying to lose weight? Have we been in this deficit strictly for 2 to 3 weeks? Are you measuring progress in only scale weight, or are we using progress pictures or measurements and other metrics of success? Are you eating enough protein to preserve or build muscle mass? Are you drinking enough water? Is there a variety of fruits and veggies so we can ensure we're eating enough micronutrients? Are you supplementing with anything if necessary or desired? Are you putting an emphasis on both quantity and quality sleep? Are you getting in your training sessions each week and working hard during those sessions? Do you have a program that's designed to get you where you want to be while taking into account injury, movement deficits, and capabilities, etc.? Are you actually treating your cardiovascular training as such and pushing yourself when the program calls for that to happen? These questions hold a host of different variables, and I could honestly list quite a few more. These are very common things and are often overlooked when we look at the uncommon, when we choose to focus our attention on the medication, the metabolism, the genetics, etc., right? We forget that many people are in the same situation, but we often forget what's in our control, right? And often I see this get in the way of someone's journey, and it's so hard to watch. It's so hard for them to go through, especially, right? It's disempowering. You can see people feel helpless because they're focusing on all that's out of their control while forgetting those aspects that they are able to influence. Early in my career, I joined quite a few groups on Facebook to see kind of what people were asking when they wanted to lose weight. What were the common questions? So I'm in quite a few Facebook groups that are weight loss support groups and the calorie tracking groups and that kind of realm of things. And so often the questions that I see posted are the little details. What time should I eat? What is the best food for X, right? What is the most beneficial workout that I can do? It's all of the, extreme ends of the best or the worst. We forget that often living in this gray is where all of those controllables lie, right? Because when we live there and we control what we're able to and we take action on that, we can see progress despite some of these factors that again might influence but might not stop us entirely. But when we focus on these things that are told to us as, hey, as you get older, you will gain weight, instead of saying, hey, as I get older, what do people do, right? And often this is a popular example. We were just talking about this as a team at Unity. Often menopause is blamed for people gaining weight, but there's been studies that have looked at, is it actually menopause or is it as we age? And get into those years of our lives, often our activity level drops, right? So is it menopause, or could it be that we simply move less without even realizing it, right? We forget about the moving less. We choose to simply blame the thing that's out of our control instead of focusing what's in our control. And as a result, instead of taking this action, we end up at a standstill. We begin to believe that we are the victim and we don't have control. But the truth is that control is there. We simply have to take it. We simply have to control what we are able to and focus on the right things to be able to take the action and move ourselves forward in our journeys despite the excuses and the reasons that might stand in our way or want to steer us off course. That brings us to our empowered action for this week, and today, pretty simple. I'm going to challenge you to do just that. To take action despite the things that people, the internet, influencers, and news articles say will stop you. Challenging you to pursue the life you want to live and take just one step forward towards those goals you want to achieve, despite someone else or something else telling you that one obstacle in your way is insurmountable, because I assure you that it may not be, and you will never know unless you simply try, you take action against it. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Feel Your Freedom podcast. As always, if you know someone that this episode will help, please share it with them. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, you can go ahead, if you wouldn't mind, and leave a rating and review. It does help the show to grow as well. Final note, if there's anything you want me to talk about in an episode, go ahead and shoot me an email, coachemilymeyer@gmail.com, or reach out on social media on Facebook or Instagram at Coach Emily Meyer on both places, and let me know what you'd rather or what you'd want to hear me talk about. Hopefully not rather than this, but in addition to some of the other topics that I have lined up. So without further ado, I will chat with you guys next week. Bye, everybody.